You are watching T to the M to the IDD.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? T to the M to the IDD. If you do not know, I am a content creator that enjoys doing photography, making vlogs, and just everything that has to do with fun in general. Recently, I rented the Fuji XT5 with the XF 50mm lens just to use for 7 days to bring something new to the channel and to have my thoughts captured about this APS-C camera. A lot of people have been telling me great things about Fuji, so I wanted to test it out for myself and see what exactly my thoughts are. So after 7 days of testing this and just using it on, I did about 5 photo shoots in different scenarios, I finally have came to a few conclusions about this lens, or opinions that I have about this lens. So first off, let's go over a few things. I rented this particular camera from Aperture Rent. And I want to note that because I think a lot of the times we have our eyes on cameras, and instead of going that route and renting it first, we just jump the gun and buy it, get on that waiting list, buy it, purchase it, and that's it. And that's good for some purchases. You just know that you want it. But if you're on the fence about it, I definitely think that Aperture Rent is a great place to start to rent your gear, because you can get it shipped worldwide. Now, I'm going to leave a link down below and you can check them out and let them know that T-Med sent you. Now, I've done about 5 photo shoots with this camera, and I've used it in various situations. Now, I used it with COLLAB LED lights, I've used it with off-camera flash, and I have used it with flash inside the studio as well, and then natural light. Now, a few things I want to touch on from my perspective, and again, this is coming from a perspective of a Nikon photographer, mainly use Nikon and Sony. Now, the Fuji was a new system for me, so it was a learning curve, but I would say it wasn't as bad as I would have thought. Now, with the current design, it immediately made me think of the Nikon ZF-C that I had used with this retro type of look. But once you go beyond that, there were a few things that kind of caught my eye after using several other systems. Now, keep in mind, I have used the Sony A7 R5, Sony A7 R4, Canon R5, Canon R6, Canon RP, Nikon Z7 II, Nikon Z9. The list goes on. So I am coming from a place of experience when I am talking about these features that I'm going to mention. And let's just run it down, and I'll try to be quick just on my thoughts of this system. Okay, let's jump right into it. Firstly, I want to talk about the ergonomics, because when you pick up a camera, that is kind of the first thing. You want it to feel good in your hands. Now, I don't think that I have the biggest hands, and so I thought this was important to pick out and state immediately, is that this grip right here, or lack thereof, is kind of a problem for me. I don't feel like it is enough of a grip where I feel comfortable with it. So I think from my perspective, this grip could be just a little thicker, just to give me a little bit more to hold on to. Now, have no fear, I have seen a small rig have an accessory that can give you a little bit more grip. So I'm glad that I'm not the only person that feels that way. Otherwise, it does feel kind of good. I know with bigger lenses with this body, it is going to be kind of front heavy for most lenses, but otherwise, I think ergonomically, it is pretty good. Now, if I go into the menu system, being as though this is a new menu system for me, I did not have too much of a problem getting to what I needed to get to. So I'm pretty sure people who are native to this system is just like the back of their hand. But for me to mainly use Nikon and Sony menu systems, I didn't have a problem getting to what I needed to be able to get the right settings for my shots. Now also they have like a quick lookup button that I thought was a nice feature, because it just gives you everything up front in your face, and you can go through and parse through everything that you need right there as well. So that sums that portion up. That's pretty much all I will have to say about that. The next thing I wanted to talk about was battery life. They rate this at I think about 700 frames on a battery. And when I did a shoot, I shot for about 5 hours in my home studio, and I got well over 700 shots. So I know that this camera is definitely good on the battery. Now, I was looking at the battery recharge, and it does take a little bit of time recharging, but as far as battery life, when I'm using it, I know that the duration that I used it, that would have been several shoots, okay? So battery life, I am giving it a great, I'm gonna give it a thumbs up on that. Now, the file sizes, I think it's good that they have different variations that you can choose. I like to shoot JPEG and RAW. That's just one thing that I love to do. Now, I did shoot just RAW uncompressed at first, and those files, 80 megabytes, okay? So I said, yeah, I'm gonna have to scale it back. So I went, I went lossless compressed, and it scaled it back to about 36, which I am happy with because my Nikon files are about 45. So I'm comfortable in that range. You also can get lossless, and that gives you just a little bit less, coming in around 30 to 35. So you do have options when it comes to the file size. And you know, right now data storage is starting to get a little cheaper. So, you know, if you want all of the data that you can have, go for it. I definitely think that the files in comparison are pretty similar, but when you start to push in the data, that fully uncompressed may offer you just a little bit more. Now, the image quality, I'm kind of drawn back on the image quality. I mean, I knew that Fuji had a great system, right? But when I zoomed in, and when I say, I know it's a combination of the body, the processor inside of this body, and then also this lens, because this is an awesome lens. But when I zoomed in, and when I say that it is tack sharp, it is tack sharp. The image quality out of this system is amazing, and I can't deny that. That also goes to the color science. The color science from system to system, you know, Canon has their thing, Sony has their thing, but Nikon has great color science. Everybody has been improving their color science, Canon and Sony alike, but Fuji color science is really tremendous. And that's just like straight out of camera file JPEGs. I love those. And then when I went to go with the RAWs, the dynamic range in the RAWs, where I can really bring detail back, it is amazing. So that's a great job when you talk about the file quality from this camera. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of on a note where there is some improvement that can be made, and that is the autofocus. Now, this is not something that is new to anybody. I think that most people know that the autofocus can use some upgrading, okay? And the reason I say that is because when I was in the studio using this camera, it pretty much did not miss, okay? And that's in a scenario where I'm not really moving around. I have my model kind of sitting. The poses aren't too dynamic. I'm not going too crazy as if my models were doing ballet or something like that. In that case, it probably would have struggled just a bit. But what I'm more so talking about is the focusing when I was outdoors. I had the model kind of walking and I was getting shots walking with them. And the focusing, it did struggle. It really did struggle. And that's from me using the R5, the Z9, and you know, all of those, the A7R5. So those cameras that do have great tracking systems. And then when you compare it, but you know, when it comes to like a XT5, I might be looking at more of like a R7 or maybe an R6 or even an entry level like Z5 or something around there. But even when I look at the entry level mirrorless cameras, autofocusing system, and compare it to this, I still feel like this could improve. And I've heard a lot of stories about the GFX 50S, about how slow it focuses and things of that nature. So I wasn't too surprised on the autofocusing system when I used it, given the background of the autofocusing. And I won't beat a dead horse because I'm pretty much anybody that knows Fuji, for the most part, they already would agree to that point that they can improve on it. So hopefully Fuji comes together and just makes it stellar. But I will say, when that focusing does hit, the image is absolutely sharp. Okay, and I was shooting wide open at 1.0 aperture. All right, so lastly, what I will talk about is the ISO. And the ISO, I did push it a bit when I was in the studio using LED lights because I really wanted to push it and see what it could do. And it made a great time to do it because my LEDs were about 100 watts. So I could really play and push. And I would say cameras today, they have a great range in the ISO, right? So it was no shock that I could push it a bit. Now, when you get on the higher limits of this camera, you can really see there's an APS-C and you can see the grain in the image. So on the higher end where it kind of maxes out, yeah, you can see the ISO, you can see the grain, you can see that it's being pushed. But on the lower end, I think you can still get some awesome shots from this camera. I think it's a great thing that Fuji has here. This is my first time using Fuji and even an APS-C system. If you have any other recommendations that I should use, let me know in the comments below. Any other gear you would like to see on this channel, let me know that in the comments as well. And let me know your experience with Fuji, if you use the XT5 or any of the other XT systems. One of the things that made me navigate to this one was that 40.2 sensor, because I love those megapixels, I can't lie. And it did not disappoint me, I can say that. But also remember the link in the below for the aperture rent. If you need to rent some gear, if you are in the market for something and you're looking, trust me, use the link and save your thoughts. You could test it. They got different 3, 7, whatever you need. So that is my first impressions, 7 days of using this XT5, and I want to hear from you. Hope you enjoyed this video. T to the M to the IDD. Peace. What is going on, guys? You just tuned in to T to the M to the IDD. And if you enjoy this content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you really enjoy the content, check out some more of the videos that you see right here. Oh yeah, and hit that like button for me.